One day before my son's wedding, his fiancée leaned close and whispered in my ear, "As of tomorrow you will no longer be part of this family. You will not be welcome." Something inside me snapped. I decided to stay home devastated. What I did not know was that, hours later, their wedding would fall apart completely for a reason no one expected. But before I continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories reach. As of tomorrow you're just an old story for this family. That was exactly what my son's fiancée whispered to me on the eve of the wedding, while the other guests chatted animatedly in the background. Her smile never faltered for a second, but her eyes were cold as ice. I froze. The gift I had brought, a memory album I had spent months preparing, hung from my trembling hands like a dead weight. In that moment something inside me broke. After 2 decades of raising my son alone, making every imaginable sacrifice, this woman was calmly telling me I no longer had a place in his life. My name is Mary Johnson, and for 25 years I was both mother and father to Andrew. When my husband left us, Andrew was only 5 years old, still clutching that stuffed dinosaur he wouldn't let go of even to sleep. I remember that first night alone when he asked me with those huge eyes, "Mom, when is Dad coming back?" Swallowing my tears, I only smiled and told him that sometimes people need to follow different paths. From then on it was years of waking up at 5 in the morning to get him ready for school before rushing to my first shift at the clinic where I worked as a receptionist. Then I would go to my second job at a department store until late. Many times I came home so exhausted that I barely had time to take off my shoes before falling asleep. But I always saved energy to hear how his day had been, to help with homework, to be his personal cheerleader at school soccer games. I saved every penny I could. I gave up new clothes, cut my hair, and sold the car to pay tuition when scholarships weren't enough. When Andrew graduated from law school, I felt I had kept the silent promise I made to that frightened little boy. He would have every possible opportunity no matter what I had to sacrifice. So when he introduced me to Lisa 3 years ago, I really tried to like her. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and eloquent. Everything I had never been. She worked at a well-known advertising agency and was always impeccably dressed. Andrew seemed enchanted. His eyes lit up when she entered a room, and I only wanted to see him happy. But there was something about Lisa that unsettled me from the start. The way her smile vanished when Andrew turned his back. How she spoke to me in that condescending tone, as if she were doing me a huge favor merely by addressing me. At family gatherings she monopolized attention talking about international trips and famous clients, rarely showing interest in my life or in Andrew's childhood stories. "Oh, how sweet," she would say when I mentioned something from the past, as if I were talking to a child. On Andrew's 30th birthday I baked the chocolate raspberry cake I had always made for him since he was 12. It was our tradition. When I arrived with him at the party, Lisa took the plate from my hands with a tight smile. "Andrew is following a low-carb diet now, Mary, but thanks for the effort." The cake sat untouched in the kitchen while Andrew, unaware, ate the gourmet canapés she had ordered. I swallowed my wounded pride, as I always did. I told myself it was just her way. She comes from another world, she doesn't understand our simple traditions, and deep down I hoped that with time we would grow closer and she would see me as family. The engagement came quickly, barely 1 year after they started dating. Andrew was radiant, telling me that he had proposed during a sophisticated dinner at a seaside restaurant. I forced a smile and hugged him tight, telling him how happy I was for him while fighting a sense of loss I couldn't explain. Wedding preparations excluded me entirely. I was not called for menu tastings, cake selection, florist visits, or any other decisions. When I gently asked if I could help, Lisa replied, "Don't worry about anything, Mary. We've hired the best professionals. You just need to show up looking nice on the day." And so it went until the eve of the wedding, when I decided to make one last effort to build a bridge. I prepared an album full of photos and memories of Andrew's life, from his first steps to his graduation from law school. Each page told a story of love and perseverance. Each photo was carefully chosen to show the wonderful man my son had become. I arrived at the rehearsal dinner with the album wrapped in silver gift paper. Lisa intercepted me at the entrance, her white rehearsal dress gleaming under the soft lights. "You came," she said with a superficial smile. "Of course I came," I replied, handing over the package. I made this for you. I thought maybe you could look through it together tonight, before the big day." It was then, her expensive perfume invading my space, that she whispered the words that would mark me forever. "As of tomorrow, you're just an old story for this family. You've done your part, you raised Andrew. Now he's my husband, my family. And you're just extra baggage. Don't embarrass us by clinging to him." I stood there frozen, incredulous. Before I could answer, she went on. "In fact, maybe it's better if you don't even show up tomorrow. You'll save us the drama, Mary. It's not like anyone really expects you to be there." I don't remember how I left. I don't remember driving home. I only remember sitting on the edge of my bed staring at the teal dress I had bought especially for the wedding, while silent tears ran down my face. That night I made a decision I never thought I would make. For the first time in Andrew's life, I would not be there for him. I would not attend the wedding. That decision, which felt like my final surrender, would end up being the catalyst for a devastating truth no one was prepared to face. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and blue, the kind of perfect day every bride dreams of for her big moment. I woke before the alarm, my body moving on automatic like a clock. For an instant I moved mechanically. I made coffee, took the dress off the hanger, and set aside the shoes I had bought for the occasion, simple but elegant, the kind a proud mother would wear to her son's wedding. Then Lisa's words came back like a punch to the stomach. "You're nothing but extra baggage." I sat at the kitchen table with my hands trembling around a cup of coffee while the morning sun traced patterns on the tiled floor I had laid myself years earlier, back when I didn't have the money to hire a professional. My phone started vibrating endlessly. Messages poured in from relatives and friends, all on their way to the church, all asking where I was. I ignored every one of them. After an hour, the first call from Andrew came. I let it go to voicemail, unable to hear his voice without breaking down. His message sounded worried and confused. "Mom, where are you? We're all waiting for you. Please call me." It was the first time in 25 years that I had deliberately disappointed him. The pain was almost physical, as if something vital inside me were being torn apart. But Lisa's words had opened a wound I had been ignoring for too long. For years I put Andrew's needs above my own. I buried my feelings, swallowed veiled insults and condescending treatment, all in the name of love for my son. But that morning something different stirred inside me. A voice saying, "You deserve respect too. You deserve dignity too." For the first time I was choosing myself instead of always choosing for him. At 10 o'clock the doorbell rang. It was my sister Susan, still dressed for the wedding, her face a mix of worry and irritation. "Mary, what the hell are you doing? Everyone's looking for you. The ceremony starts in an hour." I motioned for her to come inside. I couldn't speak, the tears wouldn't let me form words. We sat in the living room. The teal dress still hung on the closet door like a ghost of what should have been. "I'm not going," I finally managed to say. Susan stared at me as if I had just announced I was moving to Mars. "What do you mean you're not going? It's your only son's wedding. Lisa told me that after the wedding I wouldn't be part of their family anymore." I explained, my voice heavy with disbelief. "She told me I shouldn't even show up today," I repeated, and my sister went pale. Indignation replaced the confusion on her face. I nodded, and the tears finally shattered what little self-control I had left. Lisa had said I was extra baggage, that I had already played my part and needed to exit the stage. Susan sat heavily beside me, taking my hands in hers. For a long moment only the ticking of the wall clock broke the silence. "Oh, Mary," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "I always suspected something was off about that girl. She may love him in her own way." I tried to hold on to a spark of hope for Andrew's future. "No," Susan countered, shaking her head. "Love doesn't do this. Love doesn't exclude. Love doesn't humiliate." As we talked, my phone kept buzzing with messages and calls. Andrew growing more desperate, friends confused. Curiously, Lisa's family completely silent. Around 11 the church bells began to ring in the distance. I pictured the guests taking their seats, Andrew nervous at the altar, Lisa probably in some side room satisfied by my absence. I thought that maybe this was the beginning of the end of my central role in his life. A step into the shadows, into the role of a distant figure tolerated only on holidays and birthdays. But fate had other plans. Shortly after noon, when the bells should have been announcing the union, My phone rang again. It was Susan. She had gone back to the church at my request. Her voice trembled so much I could barely understand her words. "Mary," she whispered, as if afraid of being overheard. "The wedding didn't happen." My heart stopped. "What do you mean it didn't happen?" I asked. "Andrew found out," she said. "He uncovered everything about Lisa moments before the ceremony." I felt the ground vanish beneath my feet. "She's been cheating on him with her boss for months. And there's more. Her family is bankrupt. They needed Andrew's money to save themselves. The prenup they were so insistent on was a trap to channel his future earnings into their family's accounts," Susan continued. "The world spun as the pieces fit together. The casual comments about Andrew's future salary, Lisa's insistence on controlling every financial detail of their relationship. I remembered the way her father had told me during the engagement with an enigmatic smile. "Your struggle is over, Mary. Now it's our turn to take care of Andrew." It wasn't love. It never was. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to use my son and exploit everything he had achieved through hard work, everything we had built together. "How is Andrew?" I managed to ask, my voice barely recognizable even to myself. There was a long pause, only Susan's uneven breathing filling the silence. "He's devastated," she finally said, "but also determined. You should have seen him, Mary. When he confronted her in front of everyone, he was different, as if he'd woken from a long sleep." When I hung up the phone, I sat motionless for several minutes trying to process it all. The wedding that never happened, the betrayal, the financial scheme. And in the middle of all of it, the absence I thought would destroy me, my absence, turned out to be the only thing that spared me from witnessing my son's public humiliation. I thought, with bitter irony, that maybe I should thank Lisa for keeping me away that day. The hours that followed passed in a feverish blur. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Each new tone brought more details of the disaster at the church. Guests leaving in shock, Lisa's family trying to control the damage, inventing stories, blaming Andrew for leaving her at the altar. And at the center of the storm, my son, whom I still hadn't seen. Around 3 in the afternoon there was a loud knock at the door. I opened it and found Andrew on the threshold, still in his wedding suit, his tie undone, his eyes red. Without a word he stepped inside and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Mom," he whispered into my hair. "Did you know?" My heart sank. "Know what, son?" I asked. "About Lisa, about who she really is." I pulled back gently and looked into his eyes. I knew she didn't want me around, that she didn't respect me. But no, Andrew, I didn't know about the betrayal or her family's financial plans. He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "She told you not to come, didn't she? That's why you weren't there." I couldn't lie to him, I never could. The night before she told me that after the wedding, I would no longer be part of her family. That it was better if I didn't even show up, I said, and a new wave of pain and anger crossed his face. "And you believed her? Did you really think I would allow that?" he asked in disbelief. That question pierced me like lightning. After years of raising him and knowing his heart better than anyone, had I really come to believe that he would let them push me out of his life? The truth hurt. Yes, I had believed it. Not because I doubted Andrew, but because I had witnessed the power Lisa held over him, the way he seemed blind whenever it came to her. Andrew collapsed onto the sofa, covering his face with his hands. "I know," he murmured through his fingers. "I know." I sat beside him and gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "What happened at the church?" "I want to hear it from you," I said. Andrew took a deep breath, gathering strength. "Robert, my godfather, received photos of Lisa with her boss Mark, recent photos from 2 weeks ago. They were, well, it was obvious what was happening," he said, swallowing hard. "Robert showed them to me minutes before the ceremony. At first I didn't believe it. I thought it must be some misunderstanding or old images. But they weren't. The date was stamped in the corner of the photos, and she was wearing the bracelet I gave her on our last anniversary," Andrew added, his voice breaking. He confronted her in the preparation room. First she denied everything, then claimed it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness. But then her cousin Emily, drunk on champagne and nerves, let slip something about the prenup and how Lisa's father had celebrated the night before that their financial problems would be solved after the wedding. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the betrayal my son had suffered. It wasn't just infidelity. It was an elaborate trap, a web of lies woven by people who were supposed to love him. That's when I realized, Andrew continued, his voice gaining strength, that it was never about me. It was about what I could provide. My future salary, my career, my contacts, everything was part of a plan. And what did you do? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A sad smile crossed his lips. I walked to the altar, not to get married, but to announce to everyone that the wedding was cancelled, that Lisa had betrayed my trust and that our relationship was over. I pictured the scene, my son, always so reserved and discreet, standing in front of 200 guests, exposing his pain and disappointment. The courage that must have taken left me speechless. Her family went crazy, Andrew continued. Lisa's father threatened me right there in front of everyone. He said I didn't know who I was messing with. Her mother started screaming that I was humiliating her daughter, and Lisa stood frozen. All that charm and sweetness vanished. She called me a coward. She said I was exaggerating, that everyone cheats, that I was ruining the best thing that had ever happened in Andrew's life. I took his hand in mine, squeezing it gently. I'm so sorry, son. He squeezed back, searching my eyes. Do you know what hurt the most? He murmured. It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even discovering the financial scheme. It was realizing that she tried to push you away from me, that she treated you as disposable. His voice broke. You gave me everything. You never abandoned me. The tears I had held back since he arrived finally spilled over. Oh, Andrew, I thought. At first I was angry because I believed you had left me just when I needed you most, but now I understand. She forced you into it. She made you believe it was what I wanted. I should never have believed her. I admitted, guilt consuming me. I should have been there for you no matter what she said. Andrew shook his head firmly. No, Mom. Maybe it was better this way. You didn't have to witness that circus. And in some strange way my absence gave him more clarity. Realizing that the most reliable and constant person in his life wasn't there. Something clicked inside him. He began questioning everything. A long silence settled between us, broken only by the distant song of birds in the garden, and the occasional ring of the phone we now ignored completely. What happens now? I finally asked. Andrew ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he had made since childhood when he was deep in thought. I'm not sure. I have to take care of the practical things. Cancel the honeymoon, return the gifts, and I imagine her family won't give up easily. Lisa's father has connections, and from what I can see, he's desperate for money, I added. We'll face it together, I affirmed, feeling a new determination grow inside me. Andrew smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen on his face in months. He nodded, squeezing my hand. That night, while he slept in the room I had kept intact for him all these years, I sat on the porch looking at the stars. The pain of what my son was going through was real and deep, but there was also secretly a small relief, as if we had narrowly escaped something much worse than a cancelled wedding. Years of manipulation, isolation, financial and emotional abuse. What I didn't know then was that the story was far from over. In fact, the events of that day would be only the prelude to an even greater battle, one that would test not only our resilience but also our dignity and our truth. The following week, at the non-wedding, as I started to call it, the storm I had feared finally arrived. It began as whispers, small ripples spreading through our relatively small community. Then, almost overnight, it turned into a tsunami. Lisa's version of events began to spread on social media. An abandoned bride, devastated by an insecure groom manipulated by a possessive mother. She posted a photo in her wedding dress with her makeup smeared and wrote, "Some people don't know when to step back. Some mothers can't cut the umbilical cord." Comments flooded her page. Strangers offering support, friends demanding to know what kind of man leaves a woman at the altar, and what kind of mother interferes in her adult son's relationship. Her narrative was convincing, emotional, and completely fabricated. Ignore it, I advised Andrew when he showed me the posts. His face was pale with rage. The people who matter know the truth. But we soon discovered it wasn't that simple. Lies have long legs, as my grandmother used to say, and Lisa's were running a marathon. I began to notice strange looks at the supermarket and conversations that stopped when I entered the pharmacy. An old school friend wrote to ask if I had really ruined the wedding out of jealousy. Even the pastor at our church, who had known me since Andrew was a child, called to talk about letting children live their own lives. The indignation I felt was soon replaced by something more painful, shame. Not because I believed the lies, but because, after years of silent sacrifice and carefully kept dignity, I was being painted as the villain in someone else's story. Meanwhile, Andrew was fighting his own battles. One of the partners at the law firm where he worked, a casual friend of Lisa's father, began questioning his judgment and emotional stability. Clients he had worked so hard to secure suddenly became hesitant to continue working with him. Then, on a cloudy Thursday morning, about 10 days after the canceled wedding, the final blow arrived. An official letter was delivered by a messenger with a stern face. I opened the envelope with trembling hands and found a legal notice. Lisa's family was suing us for defamation, emotional damages, and, most absurd of all, interference in contractual relations. I immediately called my friend Claire, who worked as a legal assistant at a major law firm in the city. She came straight to my house after her shift, her expression grave as she read through the document. "This is pure intimidation, Mary," she said, setting the papers on the kitchen table. "They're trying to scare you. That interference in contractual relations is just a fancy way of saying you ruined their financial scheme." "Financial scheme?" I repeated, shocked. "You didn't know?" Claire asked. "Lisa's family is practically bankrupt. Her father lost millions of dollars in bad investments over the past few years. They were counting on the wedding to stabilize their finances." That information hit me like a stone in my stomach. It had never been about love, not for a single moment. It was about money, control, and financial security. And when I refused to attend the wedding, a small act of self-preservation after years of enduring her behavior, I gave Lisa the perfect opportunity to change the narrative. She couldn't present herself as the opportunistic bride, so she painted me as the bitter, controlling mother who couldn't let go of her son. It was brilliant in the most perverse way. The next day, Andrew received a similar letter. He arrived pale and tossed the papers onto the table. "They're threatening to sue me too," he said. "Lisa's father told me that if I don't publicly clear her name, he'll drag us through the courts. He said he'll ruin us financially." My heart raced. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the betrayal my son had endured. It wasn't just infidelity. It was an elaborate trap, a web of lies spun by people who were supposed to love him. "That's when I realized," Andrew continued, his voice gaining strength, "that it had never been about me. It was about what I could provide. My future salary, my career, my contacts, everything was part of a plan." "And what did you do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. A sad smile passed across his lips. "I walked to the altar not to get married, but to announce to everyone that the wedding was cancelled, that Lisa had betrayed my trust and that our relationship was over." I pictured the scene, my son, always so reserved and discreet, standing in front of 200 guests, exposing his pain and disappointment. The courage that must have taken left me speechless. Her family lost control. Lisa's father threatened me right there in front of everyone. He said I didn't know who I was dealing with. Her mother started screaming that I was humiliating her daughter, and Lisa froze. All that charm and sweetness vanished. She called me a coward. She said I was exaggerating, that everyone cheats, that I was throwing away the best thing that had ever happened in Andrew's life. I took his hand in mine, squeezing it gently. "I'm so sorry, son." He squeezed my hand back, his eyes meeting mine. "Do you know what hurt the most?" he murmured. "It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even discovering the financial scheme. It was realizing that she wanted to push you away from me, that she treated you like something disposable." His voice broke. "You gave me everything. You never abandoned me." The tears I had been holding back since he arrived finally spilled over. "Oh, Andrew," I thought. "At first I was angry because I believed you had left me just when I needed you most, but now I understand. She forced you into it. She made you believe it was what I wanted. I never should have believed her," I admitted, guilt consuming me. "I should have been there for you no matter what she said." Andrew shook his head firmly. "No, Mom. Maybe it was better this way. You didn't have to witness that circus." And in some strange way my absence gave him more clarity, realizing that the most reliable and constant person in his life wasn't there. Something clicked inside him. He began to question everything. A long silence settled between us, broken only by the distant song of birds in the garden and the occasional ring of the phone we now ignored completely. "What happens now?" I finally asked. Andrew ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he had made since childhood whenever he was deep in thought. "I'm not sure. I need to deal with the practical things, cancel the honeymoon, return the gifts, and I imagine her family won't give up easily. Lisa's father has connections, and from what I can see, he's desperate for money," I added. "We'll face it together," I affirmed, feeling a new determination rising inside me. Andrew smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen on his face in months. He nodded, squeezing my hand. That night, while he slept in the room I had kept intact for him all these years, I sat on the porch looking at the stars. The pain of what my son was going through was real and deep, but there was also secretly a small relief, as if we had narrowly escaped something much worse than a cancelled wedding. Years of manipulation, isolation, financial and emotional abuse. What I didn't know then was that the story was far from over. In fact, the events of that day would be only the prelude to an even greater battle, one that would test not only our resilience but also our dignity and our truth. The following week, at the non-wedding, as I began to call it, the storm I had feared finally arrived. It began as whispers, small ripples spreading through our relatively small community. Then, almost overnight, it turned into a tsunami. Lisa's version of events started circulating on social media. An abandoned bride, devastated by an insecure groom who let himself be manipulated by a possessive mother. She posted a photo in her wedding dress, her makeup smeared, and wrote, "Some people don't know when to step back. Some mothers can't cut the umbilical cord." Comments flooded her page. Strangers offering support, friends demanding to know what kind of man leaves a woman at the altar, and what kind of mother meddles in her adult son's relationship. Her narrative was convincing, emotional, and completely fabricated. "Ignore it," I advised Andrew when he showed me the posts. His face was pale with rage. "The people who matter know the truth." But soon we discovered it wasn't that simple. Lies have long legs, as my grandmother used to say, and Lisa's were running a marathon. I began to notice strange looks at the supermarket and conversations that stopped when I walked into the pharmacy. An old school friend wrote to ask if I had really ruined the wedding out of jealousy. Even the pastor of our church, who had known me since Andrew was a child, called to talk about letting children follow their own path. The outrage I felt was soon replaced by something even more painful: shame. Not because I believed the lies, but because, after years of silent sacrifice and carefully preserved dignity, I was being painted as the villain in someone else's story. Meanwhile, Andrew was facing his own battles. One of the partners at the law firm where he worked, a casual friend of Lisa's father, began questioning his judgment and emotional stability. Clients he had worked so hard to secure suddenly became reluctant to keep working with him. Then, on a cloudy Thursday morning, about 10 days after the cancelled wedding, the final blow came. An official letter was delivered by a messenger with a stern face. I opened the envelope with trembling hands and found a legal notice. Lisa's family was suing us for defamation, emotional damages, and, most absurd of all, interference in contractual relations. I immediately called my friend Claire, who worked as a legal assistant at a major law firm in the city. She came straight to my house after her shift, her face grave as she read through the document. "This is pure intimidation, Mary," she said, setting the papers on the kitchen table. "They're trying to scare you. That interference in contractual relations is just a fancy way of saying you ruined their financial scheme." "Financial scheme?" I asked, shocked. "You didn't know?" Claire replied, "Lisa's family is practically bankrupt. Her father lost millions of dollars in bad investments over the past few years. They were counting on the wedding to stabilize their finances." That information dropped into my stomach like a stone. It had never been about love, not even for a moment. It was about money, control, and financial security. And when I refused to attend the wedding, a small act of self-preservation after years of enduring her behavior, I gave Lisa the perfect chance to rewrite the narrative. She couldn't present herself as the opportunistic bride, so she painted me as the bitter, controlling mother who couldn't let go of her son. It was brilliant in the most twisted way. The next day Andrew received a similar letter. He arrived pale and threw the papers onto the table. "They're threatening to sue me too," he said. "Lisa's father says if I don't publicly clear her name, he'll drag us through the courts." He says he'll ruin us financially. My heart raced. The officer interrupted, his voice now softer. I strongly advise you to come with an attorney. I left the groceries right there and drove home in shock. My hands shook so much I could barely unlock the door. Once inside, I immediately called Andrew. He rushed out of the courthouse as soon as he heard the tremor in my voice. When he got home, he had already seen the document an officer had left at my door while I was out, an official summons detailing the accusations. According to the complaint, I had threatened the Smith family with making false information public, unless they paid a significant amount of money to keep me silent. This is completely fabricated, Andrew said, his face red with anger as he read the document. They're trying to criminalize us for exposing the truth about them. How can they invent accusations like this? I asked. They don't always need proof to open an investigation, Andrew answered, running his hand through his hair in frustration. They had probably manufactured some kind of evidence, fake emails, edited recordings, anything that could give an initial appearance of credibility. My voice sounded small even to me, but Andrew spoke with determination. We'll fight, and this time not just for our reputation but for your freedom. The next morning we showed up at the police station. Andrew had spent the night preparing our initial defense while I sat at the kitchen table going over every detail I could remember about my interactions with the Smith family. The station was an old, imposing building in the center of the city. As we climbed the steps to the entrance, I saw a small group of reporters gathering. Someone had leaked the accusation to the press. Don't say anything, Andrew murmured, putting a protective arm around me as we hurried past the journalists. Not a word. Detective Harris was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and an expression that was hard to read. He led us to a small interrogation room. The whole experience felt surreal to me. I had never been on the other side of the law. He turned on a recorder and asked, Mrs. Johnson, are you aware of the charges against you? I answered, surprised by the firmness of my own voice. Yes, and they are completely false. Andrew stepped in with professionalism. Detective, I want it on record that my mother categorically denies these accusations, and that we will fully cooperate with the investigation. We trust that the truth will prevail. The interrogation was agonizing and lasted 2 hours. They asked about every interaction I had with Lisa and her family, my reasons for not attending the wedding, and what I intended when I collaborated on the report that exposed the Smiths. I answered each question honestly, but as it went on, I noticed something troubling in the detective's tone. It seemed as if he had already formed an opinion, as if he were following a protocol rather than truly investigating. When we left, Andrew was tense. He's not being impartial, he murmured as we walked to the car. Do you think Lisa's family has influence with the police? I asked. Maybe not directly, he replied. But her father has enough money and connections to open doors, and desperate people don't care about ethics. In the following days, things got worse. The story was leaked to all the local newspapers, though in a distorted way. I was turned into the mother accused of extorting her son's ex-fiancé. My name and photo were everywhere. The small beauty salon where I worked part-time called me gently to suggest it might be best if I took a leave until everything was resolved. Neighbors who had begun greeting me again after David Miller's report went back to looking the other way. The sense of isolation became overwhelming. One night, sitting at the kitchen table going over documents with Andrew, I broke down in tears. Maybe we should give up, I whispered. Maybe we should say what they want to hear, retract publicly. Andrew set the papers aside and took my hands. Mom, look at me, he said, his eyes firm and determined. That's exactly what they want, to break us, to make us doubt the truth so you'll accept any deal. But it's not going to happen. You won't be arrested for something you didn't do. We have the truth on our side and now we also have help, he added with a small smile. David is furious about this attempt to criminalize the press. He's investigating Detective Harris for connections with the Smiths, and Claire managed to get her boss, one of the most respected defense attorneys in the city, to take our case pro bono. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. We weren't alone. The following week, the case took an unexpected turn. David published a new report, this time focused on the questionable investigative methods used in my case. He had discovered that Detective Harris had a son employed at one of the few remaining companies in Mr. Smith's collapsing empire. a clear conflict of interest the detective had failed to disclose. At the same time, our new attorney, Dr. Thompson, filed a formal motion demanding that the evidence against me be subjected to forensic review to test its authenticity. The pressure shifted. It was no longer just us against them, but also against the system they had tried to manipulate. 3 days after Dr. Thompson's motion, we received his call, his normally calm voice now charged with emotion. The prosecutor's office is considering dropping the case. It seems the evidence doesn't hold up under closer scrutiny, and they don't want the embarrassment of pursuing such an obviously fabricated charge. Andrew and I hugged each other, crying with relief, but the news came with a condition. The Smiths proposed a deal. They would withdraw the charges if we signed a public retraction of David's report, and agreed to permanent confidentiality over the entire matter. I looked at Andrew, feeling anger rise inside me. I'm not going to lie to save their reputation. I will not deny the truth, I said firmly, surprised even by the strength of my conviction. Andrew nodded, a proud smile lighting up his face. Dr. Thompson, I added, our answer is no. Tell them we're willing to go all the way. It was a risky gamble. We were challenging a powerful and desperate family to do their worst. But something had changed in me. The fear that had paralyzed me days before had turned into iron determination. I had spent my life bending, adjusting, and sacrificing my dignity for others' comfort. No more. And then when our defiance reached the Smiths, something extraordinary happened. They backed down. 2 weeks later, the case was officially dismissed for lack of evidence. The detective was removed from the case for the conflict of interest. And even more surprising, Lisa and her family left the city almost overnight, moving somewhere far away where their names and reputations wouldn't be stained by the truth that had come to light. The storm had finally passed, but as we would discover in the months to come, it left as much destruction as it did growth in its wake. It's strange how life marks us, how certain experiences imprint themselves on us and change not only who we are but also the way we see the world. In the months following the dismissal of the case, I experienced that truth firsthand. The immediate relief gave way to something more complex, a healing process that was both liberating and painful. Perhaps the hardest part was accepting that, even with our public vindication, some wounds would never fully heal. Some neighbors remained distant. Certain friendships never fully recovered. Doubt, once planted, is a persistent seed. Andrew faced his own challenges, though his career at the law firm finally moved forward without the shadow of false accusations. The emotional trauma from Lisa's betrayal left him cautious, reserved. He threw himself into work with an intensity that sometimes worried me, as if he believed he could erase the memories through sheer effort. You need to give yourself time, I would tell him gently on nights when I found him still bent over files at 2 a.m, his eyes red from fatigue. Pain doesn't disappear if you ignore it. I'm fine, Mom, he would reply, with that smile that never reached his eyes. I just have a lot of work. But there were also moments of genuine growth between us. One night, about 6 months after all the chaos, we were sitting on the porch watching a summer storm approach. The air smelled of rain, and distant lightning flashed across the dark sky. You know what's strange? Andrew suddenly said, breaking our comfortable silence. Now I look back and see all the signs I ignored with Lisa. The way she talked about money, how she tried to pull me away from people who truly cared about me, how she reacted when I mentioned pro bono cases. It's always easier to see the patterns in hindsight, I answered softly. But it's not just that. He turned toward me, his eyes serious in the dim porch light. I wonder why I ignored those signs, why I wanted so badly to believe in her that I was willing to sacrifice the things and people who truly mattered. That was a question I had asked myself countless times, but never dared to say aloud. Why had my intelligent, sensitive son fallen so completely under someone like Lisa's spell? I think I was trying to fill something, he continued, the words spilling slowly, as if he were discovering the truth as he spoke. After Dad left, I always felt there was something broken in me, something that made me feel not enough. And Lisa seemed so perfect, so complete. I thought being with her would somehow make me whole. My heart tightened as I thought of all those years and all those sacrifices made to protect him from the pain of abandonment. And yet, she had found her way in. Andrew, you were never not enough. Never, I said. He smiled, a small genuine smile that spread across his face. I know that now, he added. Ironically, thanks to Lisa. If she hadn't come in and turned our lives upside down, maybe I never would have confronted that fear. Maybe I never would have realized that I am enough just as I am. At that moment, as the first drops of rain fell, I felt a kind of peace between us. The understanding that sometimes the most violent storms bring about the most necessary changes. For me, the change came more gradually but no less profoundly. After decades of defining my identity almost exclusively through motherhood and sacrifice, I began rediscovering parts of myself I had long forgotten. I returned to painting, a passion I had abandoned when Andrew was a baby due to lack of time and resources. I started with small watercolors and then moved on to larger canvases, letting colors and shapes express what words sometimes could not. The first time Andrew saw one of my finished paintings, he stood in the doorway of the small space I had turned into an improvised studio, his eyes wide. "Mom, this is incredible. I had no idea you painted like this." "There are many things about me you don't know," I replied with a smile. It was true. There were parts of Mary, the woman beyond Mary, the mother, that were resurfacing after a long sleep. With Claire's encouragement, I also began attending a support group for women who had gone through trauma or major life transitions. At first I went only to listen, intimidated by the idea of sharing my story with strangers. Over time I found my voice and, most importantly, a community of women who understood what it meant to be tested to the limit and still remain standing. It was in that group that I met Jennifer, a psychologist specializing in helping people rebuild their lives. After hearing my story, Jennifer made me a surprising proposal. "Mary, have you ever thought about using your experience to help others? We have a mentorship program for women in similar situations, and I think you would be an extraordinary mentor." The idea that my pain could have a greater purpose, that it could serve to help others navigate their own storms, lit something inside me. I began training with Jennifer, learning the skills necessary to provide support without becoming emotionally overwhelmed. 6 months after the case was closed, I gave my first formal talk to a small group of women. My hands shook so much I nearly dropped my notes, but once I started speaking, the words flowed naturally. "My name is Mary. For most of my life I believed love meant erasing yourself. I'm here to say I was wrong." The women in the room, some with visible scars, others with hidden wounds, kept their eyes fixed on me. An instant connection arose through shared understanding. True strength is not about how much suffering you can endure in silence. It is about knowing when to speak up, when to set boundaries, when to say, "No, this is not acceptable." And sometimes true strength is asking for help when you need it most. As I spoke, I realized I was not only helping those women, but also reinforcing lessons I was still learning. My dignity mattered as much as anyone else's. True love never requires you to shrink yourself. Even after 50, there is still time to discover new parts of yourself. Andrew came to pick me up afterward. He was waiting outside with a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite flowers. Surrounded by women who wanted to continue the conversation and share their stories, I saw the pride in his eyes. "How did it go?" he asked when I finally said goodbye to the group. "Transformative," I replied, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in years. On the way home we talked about the future, a luxury that at the height of the crisis with the Smiths had seemed like something we might never have again. Andrew was thinking of opening his own law firm, focused on helping people who had been victims of financial fraud. I was considering going back to school, maybe taking a counseling course to complement my mentoring work. "You know what's most incredible, Mom?" Andrew said as we stopped at a red light. "A year ago the two of us were just surviving. Now we're really living." His words captured perfectly the transformation we had undergone. The crisis that was supposed to destroy us had instead forced us to grow in ways we never could have imagined. That night, sitting alone in my little makeshift studio, I began a new painting. I didn't paint the storm we had faced, but the dawn that followed. Warm colors of hope and renewal stretching across the horizon. As the brush moved across the canvas, I thought of the journey that had brought us here and of the cruel words Lisa had whispered on the eve of the wedding that never happened. "As of tomorrow, you're just an old story for this family." She had been right, but not in the way she imagined. The tomorrow she predicted never came. Instead, a different future opened up. One she could never have anticipated and one I hardly dared to dream of. A future in which I was not just extra baggage in my son's life, but a woman rediscovering her own strength. The bond between Andrew and me, tested to its limits, emerged not only intact but stronger and healthier than before. The scars we carried stopped being marks of shame and became medals of survival. As the colors blended on the canvas, I felt a deep gratitude for that new dawn. Not just for what it meant, but for the price we had paid to reach it. A price that, however terrible, was worth every effort. 1 year after that first painting, the canvas hung in a prominent place in the living room. A daily reminder that darkness eventually yields to light. Time, master of subtle transformations, had done its healing work. It had not erased the scars, but had woven them into the tapestry of our lives. Andrew thrived in ways that filled my chest with a pride I sometimes didn't know how to express. He truly opened his own law firm, small but quickly growing, specializing in helping victims of financial fraud and legal manipulation. The work fulfilled him in a way his previous job never had. Each case is different, he told me one night during one of our Sunday dinners, which had become a tradition. I see something of you in every client, Mom, and I remember why I chose this path. My own path also took unexpected turns. The mentoring work expanded. I began giving regular talks in community centers, women's shelters, and even some local universities. My message grew beyond just my story to address broader issues. Power dynamics in relationships, signs of emotional manipulation, and the importance of preserving your identity even in the closest bonds. On top of that, I finished the counseling course. At 53, I became a student again, sitting among young people in their 20s, absorbing knowledge with a thirst only life experience can awaken. At first, I felt out of place, almost embarrassed to be starting over so late. Soon I discovered that my unique perspective was valued by both professors and classmates. You've lived what we're only just beginning to study, a 22-year-old colleague told me after I shared part of my experience in class. That added a new dimension to learning. Painting remained my private sanctuary. My small improvised studio grew to fill the extra room that once stored keepsakes in dusty boxes. The walls became covered with pieces, some somber, exploring the darkest corners of the journey, others bursting with light and possibility. 6 months ago, to my complete surprise, a small local gallery invited me to exhibit some works in a collective show on art and healing. The opening night felt almost unreal. Seeing strangers stand before my paintings, finding their own meanings in the colors and shapes I had poured out, moved me deeply. Andrew stayed by my side the entire evening, present and supportive. At one point, I noticed him silently staring for several minutes at a piece I had created during the darkest days of the legal ordeal. Deep blues and violets with only a tiny point of golden light on the horizon. That's how it felt, isn't it? He asked, not taking his eyes off it. I nodded, surprised by his perception. He turned to me, his eyes shining, and said, "You've always been stronger than I imagined, Mom. Stronger than you even knew yourself." Those words stayed with me. They were a balm whenever old insecurities tried to creep back. As for Lisa and the Smith family, they had practically vanished from our lives. We heard from acquaintances that they had moved to another state. Occasionally their names surfaced. Someone who had seen them on a business trip or an old colleague who was still in touch with Lisa. Each time I felt a strange mix of emotions. A distant echo of pain and at the same time a reluctant gratitude. It may seem contradictory to feel anything but bitterness toward those who tried to destroy us, but without that storm we might never have discovered the depth of our resilience. Perhaps I would still be living on the margins of my own life, measuring my worth solely through motherhood. Perhaps Andrew would be chasing a kind of success that left him unfulfilled. I can't say I thank them, I never could. But I do thank the woman I became by surviving. A couple of months ago, something unexpected happened. Andrew showed up at Sunday dinner with a guest, Rachel, an environmental lawyer he had met while collaborating on a case. At first, I felt the old anxiety stir in my chest. The ghosts of Lisa haunted the edges of my mind, ready to remind me how easily I had once been discarded. But Rachel was not Lisa. That became clear within the first 5 minutes of conversation. Where Lisa spoke endlessly about herself, Rachel asked genuine questions and listened attentively. Where Lisa treated me with condescension, Rachel showed me a warm respect that didn't feel forced or calculated. At one point while I was serving dessert, she noticed one of my small paintings hanging in the hallway. "This is simply extraordinary," she said, stepping closer to examine it. The way you captured that light. Did you study formally? Not really, I replied with a smile. My mother is a curator at a gallery in Portland. She would love to see your work, Rachel said before leaving. Her tone, sincere and unpretentious, moved me deeply. I responded, a little embarrassed by the attention. It's more of a hobby I picked up again recently. You have a genuine gift, she added, and her honesty touched my heart. After Rachel left, Andrew and I washed the dishes side by side. There was a comfortable silence between us until he finally spoke. So what did you think of her? He asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide how much my answer mattered. I considered carefully before responding. She seems real grounded, the kind of person who truly sees others, I said. Andrew let out a sigh I hadn't realized he was holding. Yes, he murmured. That's exactly how I feel too. Are you serious about her? I asked, trying not to press. We're taking it slow, he answered, a small smile playing on his lips. We both have our history of complicated relationships, but I think this could be something special. I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of hope and that lingering fear that may never completely go away. Andrew must have seen something on my face, because he put down the dish he was drying and held my wet hands in his. Mom, he said then, I learned the lesson the hard way. I learned to see the warning signs, to value substance over appearance, to never let anyone push me away from the people who truly love me. His eyes met mine, steady and clear. And that includes you, it always will. That night after Andrew left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and looked at the stars. I thought of the young mother I once was, holding a small child who asked when his father would come back. I remembered the sleepless nights wondering if I was doing enough, giving enough, being enough. If I could go back and speak to that younger version of myself, what would I say? Maybe that the sacrifices would be worth it, but that she shouldn't lose herself completely in them. That one day her son would be an extraordinary man, not despite the hardships but partly because of them. That there would be pain, yes, so much pain, but also moments of joy so pure they would make everything worthwhile. And perhaps most importantly, I would tell her that the story doesn't end with, and then they lived happily ever after. It ends with, and then they kept living, growing, learning, sometimes stumbling but always moving forward. Stronger together than they could ever be apart. Last week I received an unexpected invitation. A nonprofit that works with women transitioning from abusive relationships asked me to be the keynote speaker at their annual fundraising event. The irony was not lost on me. I, who once felt so small and disposable, now invited to share my wisdom with hundreds. Of course I accepted. As I prepared my speech last night, I once again heard those cruel words whispered on the eve of the wedding that never took place. As of tomorrow, you're just an old story for this family. Lisa was wrong, but not in the way she imagined. I am not an old story. I am a story still unfolding with chapters no one, not even I, could have foreseen. Looking ahead at 54, I see possibilities where once I saw only limits. I see a son flourishing on his chosen path, perhaps finding a new love built on mutual respect and genuine admiration. I see my work touching lives in ways I never imagined. I see sunrises yet to be painted, stories yet to be told, wounds yet to be transformed into wisdom. If someone asks me how we survived the storm that nearly destroyed us, I will say this. When cruel words try to define you, when malicious hands try to make you small and disposable, remember who you truly are. You are not just a mother or a son, nor any single role the world tries to impose. You are a universe of possibilities. You are a story still being written. You are greater than any definition others may try to force upon you. And when someone tries to convince you otherwise, when they whisper that as of tomorrow you're no longer part of the family, that your worth has run out, that you no longer have a place at the table, remember this: true belonging never depends on someone else's permission. True family is not defined by prenuptial agreements or financial interests. And your story belongs to you alone. That truth saved Andrew and me in our darkest moment. It allowed us to rise not only as survivors, but as transformed beings. Today I carry that truth like a beacon. It lights my path and perhaps that of others still searching for their own light. When I look in the mirror, I no longer see only the exhausted single mother who sacrificed everything or the woman discarded by cruel words whispered on a summer night. I see Mary, whole, complex, and still evolving. A woman who, after devoting most of her life to caring for others, finally learned to care for herself too. And perhaps that is the sweetest victory of all. And now, if you enjoyed this story, click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it you'll find a story of betrayal and shock unlike anything you've seen before.